Hello, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on how we can provide cost savings for VMware Cloud on the AWS solution by integrating with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. So FSx for ONTAP helps customers obtain a cost-effective, high-performance virtualized storage infrastructure for use as a supplemental data store with VMware Cloud on AWS. And today, we're going to learn some exciting enhancements to this integration. I'm Richard Nickel, Cloud Solutions Architect with NetApp, and with me today, I have two colleagues. Niyaz Mohammed, known to me as Nemo. He specializes in VMC workloads and many others at NetApp. And from Amazon, I have Kieran Reed, Senior Partner Solutions Architect. We'll be hearing more from them later. And today during the webcast, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature of the tool to ask those questions. We'll be happy to get to them. So VMware Cloud is great, and it really provides that easy migration to the cloud and the ability to use the same set of tools and processes of the vSphere suite on-prem. But there's some challenges to overcome when you're using the NetApp. There's some challenges to overcome with using VMware in the cloud as a hypervisor, right? And using NetApp enterprise-grade storage can help with this. So one is that there's really tight coupling of compute and storage, and that can really drive up the total cost of your ownership. Other areas that can be tricky are backing up VMs without affecting your running workloads and also disaster recovery processes. So FSx for ONTAP can help in all of these areas by bringing the same set of enterprise-grade capabilities available on-prem into the cloud. And VMware is great and provides that easy integration to the cloud, but we can lower these costs. Sorry. So Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP can lower these costs by offering a way to decouple compute and storage from VMware Cloud on AWS deployments. So in our webinar today, we'll demonstrate how FSx for ONTAP can help you save up to 50% of your cost running your VMware Cloud service. In fact, later in this webinar, Nemo will run a total cost of ownership calculation exercise where you can see this in action. It's a really great demonstration, and it shows a lot of really real-world examples of it. Also, please keep your eye open for future upcoming webinars where we'll discuss the data protection and disaster recovery in more detail. So, why is VMware Cloud so important? To answer this question, I think it makes sense to start with today's infrastructure landscape. The majority of all workloads in the data center today are managed on a VMware vSphere hypervisor platform. So a large amount of customers are using VMware solutions to deliver maximum value on premises, right? Performance at scale, it's got to be reliable, it has to be available, it has to be protected and secure. And more than this, enterprise data and systems need to be integrated and easily managed by their IT departments. So really the number one thing that brought us together is hearing from customers wanting to take these workloads and moving either into a hybrid cloud relationship or entirely into the cloud, and to manage it in a similar way with the same set of tools and processes. And this is where the partnership of VMware, NetApp, and AWS brings together leaders in workload management, data management, and enterprise cloud services as one. And how have we gotten here? We have decades of partnership together. NetApp and VMware have been partnering and integrating our technologies since the beginning of VMware, going back over 20 years. So when VMs first entered the data center, right, the storage was not prepared to handle it. So NetApp and VMware spent years testing, improving, and delivering solutions that even the most data-intensive workloads that you can have running in your data center would be operating, at scale and with performance. And then once VMware was being widely adopted, we started to have a new administrator, right? And it was a VMware administrator that was in the data center, and they had to interact with storage admins and DB admins, right? And we really wanted to get all that simplicity together. So we started working on integrating our management tools, right? So that you can provide the value of VMware with all the integrated value that NetApp storage is providing underneath that. So In parallel to NetApp's partnership with VMware, we've been working with AWS now for over a decade and to enable the use of NetApp's core storage software platform, ONTAP, but use it in the cloud. And so that way we can get all the cloud benefits and all the ONTAP benefits, but together. And just like with VMware, it took us several years to get to where we are today. Initially, it was just kind of allowing you to manage ONTAP yourself. And that may, Cloud Volumes ONTAP, some of you may be familiar with. But that eventually led to where we have an AWS-native first-party and fully managed service for ONTAP. This is called FSx for NetApp ONTAP. This brought the full scale and benefits of NetApp enterprise storage and software and made it accessible to AWS customers. And more importantly, it set the stage for NetApp, VMware, AWS to develop a new and highly demanded solution to combine VMware Cloud on AWS with FSx for ONTAP. I'm going to hand it over to Kieran now to go into more details and solutions on this architecture.
I think I was on mute there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can now, yep.
Perfect, thanks again. Hey everyone, so my name is Kieran Reed. I'm a Senior Partner Solutions Architect working at AWS, and thank you all for attending today's session. So I'd like to talk to you first about why customers are moving to the AWS cloud and what kind of workloads they're actually moving into the AWS cloud. And when we talk to our customers today, we hear a combination of business drives and use cases that they are weighing up before moving workloads onto AWS. So some of them are top business drivers like simplifying IT management or avoiding hardware refreshes to reduce costs. Shutdown of existing data centers is another one. They also have cloud mandates from their business where they're asking them to adopt a cloud-first strategy. And also we have disaster recovery requirements, and that's quite a popular one, which I'll go into a little bit of detail later on. So those are some of the key requirements we're seeing. And when we talk to our customers who then made the move, we ask them what additional or indirect benefits they now have since moving to the cloud, apart from the additional the initial savings and stuff that they've been enjoying. And a lot of them saying it's the actual time that they're getting back. So for example, how many of us have sat through on a change control meeting waiting for our changes to be approved before we can rack and stack a server in a data center before we can get it online? Or even worse, waiting for another team's change, like a networking change or a data center change, to get approved before we can then do our work, or waiting for a change freeze to pass. Those are the kind of times that our customers are now getting back, where they can get those services enabled really, really quickly without having to go through that process. And when it comes to workloads, when it comes to workloads, we see a pretty balanced approach. So some customers, they're migrating a few workloads or environments over through to AWS. So they'll select some test and dev environment workloads and they'll move those across. And then we're seeing, as I mentioned before, disaster recovery requirements. That's quite a big one that, they're having a lot of regulatory requirements where the regulators are saying your DR needs to be in a different region or a different availability zone that you're currently in. Some customers have never had DR before, so that's another reason why they're having to move. And some customers have data center evacuation where they're having to move their entire production stack onto AWS. So we're seeing different workloads and applications being selected for migration, different use cases from our customer. And that brings us to the next question is, what sort of challenges are they having when they're having to migrate those workloads into the cloud? And one of the main challenges we're seeing is that held a lot of customers back was customers. Sorry, Richard, I think you're on the wrong slide. I was looking at the slide thinking, oh, that looks a bit thing there. So if you could just flick back to the previous one. There we go. Thank you. So one of the main challenges that held workloads back was the workloads were on-prem workloads are optimized to run on a VMware hypervisor. So customers wanted to maintain that platform and ensure that those workloads stayed on a VMware hypervisor. And the reason for that is they wanted to leverage all those years of monitoring, all the roadmaps that they put in place of skills and investment. So they wanted to make sure that they could keep all of that. And another one was refactoring those workloads into cloud native, and it doesn't matter which cloud provider they selected. with AWS specifically, going serverless or anything like that, that's a lot of reinvestment and stuff like that. So a lot of them wanted to avoid those challenges and just keep their workloads in their native state and just move them onto a cloud environment. And then a lot of them also wanted a cloud exit strategy. They didn't want to be locked in once they moved on to AWS or any other hyperscaler. They wanted to ensure that if they moved their workloads on there, some of them just wanted to do it for a short period of time, while they did a POC or ran something while they decided what they're going to do with their data center. They wanted to then pull those workloads back out of them. So a cloud exit strategy was also a business mandate that they were looking to do. So those are the different use cases. We looked at migration, we looked at scaling of their existing workloads, disaster recovery. Those are some of the sort of the benefits and the use cases we're seeing customers seeing, getting the time back from their data centers, not having to wait for those lengthy change control meetings and stuff like that. So if we just jump onto the next slide, Richard, we're going to then talk about Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. We're going to spend some time talking about what that is and and how that can help benefit some of this. So it's a fully managed service. It provides reliability, the scalability, and a high performance and a feature-rich file system built on NetApp's popular ONTAP file system. It combines the familiar features like performance capabilities, API operations, NetApp file systems with all the benefits, things like agility, scalability, simplicity of an AWS managed service. So FSx for NetApp ONTAP provides a shared file system that's accessible to not just hyperscalers, but to your Linux, Windows, Mac OS workloads. So it's can be used across all of those different platforms, running on AWS or your on-prem environments. So customers, you could take advantage of Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP and use a connection, VPN, direct connect through to the AWS data centers and actually leverage those capabilities on your on-prem service too. So that's something we also like to call out. And with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, you get the SSD levels of performance for your workloads, but you only pay for the SSD storage performance that you need. And that goes back to all the benefits, the tiering and everything, the efficiencies that is built into ONTAP. You're only paying for the performance when you need it. You're not paying for everything up front, and it'll obviously do some, destaging to capacity disks instead of the performance disks when you need it. So the other features that you get are all the ONTAP features that you get on-prem. So things like SnapMirror for data replication, SnapVault for backup and snapshot copies, FlexCache for on-prem caching and cloud bursting, as well as FlexClones for instant or point-in-time cloning. Now, before I go any further, that's a fair bit of NetApp terminology there. So let me just say, you don't need to be an existing NetApp customer to take advantage of all these services or the integration with VMware Cloud and AWS. You can use the AWS console to do all the provisioning and everything that you need in the AWS console, which will be familiar to a lot of you. And if not, we've got documentations and demos on how to do all of that. And then you can attach it through to the VMware Cloud and AWS SDDC using the vSphere console. So don't be worried if you're not a NetApp customer. So if you've got any DR requirements and you are a NetApp customer, you have the ability to replicate your entire storage array to another region. And this is helpful for cloning environments, for demos and testings, or to refresh lower level environments, or copy fresh production data to test or QA. So you can do that from your on-prem environment to VMware Cloud and to AWS, FSx for NetApp ONTAP, or between two different regions for the Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP or different availability zones. So that gives you that flexibility there. And again, you don't need to be a NetApp customer to take advantage of all of this. So another critical thing to bear in mind about FSx for NetApp ONTAP is the native services within AWS. Now, why is that important? It's because not only can you use these services with your on-prem environment, but you can also integrate it with all the other Amazon managed services that we've got. So you can use that for your EC2, for AWS backups, and so on. Everything like that, you can actually leverage FSx for NetApp ONTAP as your file system. So you got file, block, and object storage. You can deliver all of those to your systems. Now for management, I touched on this briefly. You don't have to use the NetApp CLIs or APIs. You can use the AWS CLIs or APIs or GUIs to actually manage that solution. So Those customers already using FSx on-prem can leverage the existing investment that they've got and the knowledge that they've got with those tools. But if you prefer to use the AWS CLIs and UIs, you can do that too. And of course, if you're doing the integration with VMware Cloud and AWS, which I'll talk through on the next slide, you can actually do that as well through the GUIs that we've got available. And finally, before we move on to the next slide, we offer full security and compliance that the enterprises expect. So end-to-end encryption, antivirus, file auditing access with third parties such as Varonis, Active Directory-based authentication, and several industry levels of security and compliance. So think of things like ISO compliance, PCI compliance, SOC, and HIPAA. Next slide, please, Richard. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of VMware Cloud and AWS, why customers move, the benefits of Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, but why did we build the integration between these two products? So when we spoke to our customers operating in a public cloud environment, they all have an expectation that they can manage compute and storage independently. And more importantly, within an AWS cloud, customers expect that they can manage capacity and performance as a distinct independent capabilities as their workload requirements dictate. So what does that mean? If you want to scale your capacity independent of compute, they should be able to do that. But also, if you want to be able to scale your IOPS independent of capacity, that's something that they should be able to do. So if you don't want if you want a bunch of IOPS without having to buy a bunch more storage, you should be able to do that. And that's what these solutions offer. And if we take a look at what we've inherently had with VMware Cloud on AWS, it's been previously built on a hyperconverged deployment. And what that means is every time a customer purchases a host, for storage, they also get a lot of compute, memory and CPU, which they may or may not need. So, and that ultimately governs the SDD size by, as much compute and storage that an SDDC can actually cope with. And that actually limits it for a lot of our larger customers. So while the hyperconverged environment actually is a really good fit for most of our customers, we wanted to ensure that the solution that we built and this integration would address those customers that have those requirements, in the cloud to scale those requirements independently. So if we go into the next slide, that's what we've done with this integration. We solve this problem by providing Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP as an external data store. So we want to call that out. It's an external data store. It's not a secondary data store. It's got all the same performance that you have with the traditional vSAN data store. And we use all those foundational services to construct our managed offering. So FSx just attaches as an external data store to your SDDC. So what do you get when you do this? So you can get up to 4 gigabits per second throughput and 192 terabytes of flash capacity. And that can go all the way up to 2 petabytes, depending on the story efficiencies and savings you have. And now that is also per file system. So what does that mean? So you're not limited to one file system per SDDC. In fact, each SDDC can start with one cluster, and that cluster can be 2 nodes up to 16, and you can go up to 20 clusters in an SDDC. And each one of those clusters can have a file system from a different NetApp filer. So we can now take the largest workloads that you've had on-prem that we previously probably couldn't do with vSAN and move them onto VMware Cloud and AWS. And in the case of DR, customers can start with as little as they need and scale up to as much as they need. And then after a DR test or an event, they can scale right back down again and only pay for the minimum storage that they need. Or indeed, if they have a data center evacuation, we can now take the majority of their workloads that they've got on-prem. And of course, within an AWS org, you can have up to, I believe it's 5 SDDCs. So you can just think about the scale that you could potentially have there. So by combining AWS, VMware Cloud and AWS with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, we do kind of have the best of both worlds, where customers can maintain all those capabilities that they were previously used to. So they can leverage the investments in their roadmaps, their skills in maintaining a VMware environment, but now they get all those efficiencies of NetApp with that and all the scalability that comes along with that, along with it being a managed service. Now, we support 2 different deployments. We support a multi-AZ and a single AZ deployment. So the multi-AZ, you get 4 nines of availability. And with a single AZ deployment for FSx, you get 3 nines of availability. And that matches up well with the SDDC. We support 2 different connectivity types. When we've launched, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, in 2022 in August, VMware Explore, we supported the TGW for both connectivity types. And as of yesterday, VMware announced support for VPC peering. So what that means for customers is with your single AZ file systems, with your VMware Cloud and AWS SDDC, you can now use VPC peering with no TGW in the middle, which reduces your costs further and helps increases latencies for certain workloads as well. So the final thing I'd like to call out again is you don't need to be a NetApp customer to take advantage of all of this. People hear the name NetApp, and that's a question we get quite a lot in the thing. Any customer from on-prem or new customers can start taking advantage of this really, really quickly. Next slide, please, Richard. Right, I touched on this previously. We jointly announced this solution in US in 2022. We've seen significant demand for the solutions as it opens up for those storage-heavy workloads, which I spoke about previously, as little as 2 clusters up to 20 per SDDC, 16 nodes, and a file system of 192 terabytes of capacity. I mentioned this earlier, but again, we now support VPC peering. So we've removed TGW as a requirement. That was a blocker for some customers. Some customers loved it because that allowed them to control the routing to different storage VPCs that they had. But some customers wanted to do away with some of that. So we've simplified that connectivity for them and made that better for them as well. We have some exciting enhancements to this partnership coming, some solution capabilities that we are going to announce in future technical deep dive sessions and webinars. But for now, I think you've seen enough talking. I'm going to transition over to Nemo. He's going to show you a demo of the total cost of ownership calculator and how it can be optimized to use Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP with VMware Cloud and AWS to save you some costs. So Nemo, if you want to come on and take the screen, I'll hand over to you. I think if you're talking, you might be on mute if you haven't started yet.
Thank you, Kiran. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks again. So far, you heard about the challenges that existed with VMware Cloud along with vSAN. And you also heard how FSx ONTAP is providing a better and compelling cloud migration and adoption path. Before we jump into the slides and the demo, let me introduce myself, and that makes me actually turn on my camera too. I'm Niaz Mohammed. People call me Nemo. I'm a principal solutions architect with NetApp, working on both cloud and hybrid cloud solutions. Now, it's the time of the webinar where we're going to talk about one step further with respect to the total cost of ownership. This is, of course, the starting point in any discussion or a decision-making journey, right? Because it's a factor that enables customer to make the right decision, or rather they would actually pivot back to the complex way of VMDK conversions and log migration waves. So let's start with an example. We'll start with the tools that is available for sizing. You can use the most common ones like RV tools, Live Optics, vRealize or IdeaOps, which is the new one, or even NetApp Cloud Insights. Now, what is that data that is required? It's all simple. All you need is just 4 parameters: the total number of virtual machines, the vCPU per virtual machine, memory per virtual machine, and storage per virtual machine. That is it. Most of the times, you can even aggregate the entire capacity and then actually spread that across the number of virtual machines that you have. You can actually fetch the data however you actually see it fit. Now, from a decision-making process, NetApp is going to make it very simple for you. What have you done? We have built a simple HTML-based total cost of ownership estimator. Now, the estimator supports RV tools as well as manual inputs. The manual inputs can come from any of the data collection tool that we spoke about, whether it's NetApp Cloud Insights or whether it's actually Live Optics or any of those things. However, in the UI, we only provide option for RV tools. It uses the same input parameters, be it any data collection tool that you use. And what we do in the estimator, fairly simple. We use VMC Sizer APIs. So let me take a step back here. For those who know that, VMware provides a sizer, which is called as the VMC sizer. And what NetApp is doing is leveraging the VMware sizer APIs, and then actually, sending the inputs as a JSON payload to that particular sizer, and actually, gets the sizing prediction back, which is again coming back to us as a response payload. So if you look at this particular slide and the example in this one, sorry, my clicker stopped working. You would see this is sizing example where customer was able to actually make around 61% of savings. And you can see the slide also shows you the numbers that was predicted both by the VMC sizer as well as the NetApp estimator. So now it's time for us to actually do a live demo. So for that, let me go ahead and switch the screen. Let me move from my PPT onto the browser. Okay, so let me just bring this up. Okay, I don't have to do that. Are you able to see my browser okay? Richard or Lior?
Yes, we can see it. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for confirming. I just want to make sure we have it. So as I said, NetApp has built this TCO estimator, and that's actually hosted on bluexp.netapp.com. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this URL. And if you go into bluexp.netapp.com, you can go under the resources, and right under the resources, you would actually see the estimator, which is called as VMC FSx for ONTAP. Now, once you are in there, you get the landing page. Let me go ahead and close the documentation. But again, you get immense help if you want to really use the documentation in there. As I said, once you are in the BlueXP browser, all you need to do is use RV tools. So let's say I'm in an engagement with a customer and I've got RV tools. All I need to do is go and select RV tools and then select the file from my desktop. So let me just find a sample file. So once I upload the file, you have to select, what are the conditions and assumptions that you need. Most of the times when you're sizing for your VMware Cloud, you make sure you're selecting only your powered on virtual machines. You're selecting the storage that is being currently utilized, then being provisioned, and then the memory, that is actually being currently utilized. And along with that, you also specify FSx ONTAP parameters, right? As you can see here, the default deployment type is single AZ. And as Kiran mentioned in the previous slides, we support both of the deployment models, but most of the customer engagements that we see go on single availability zone for the factor that, again, that Kiran mentioned, which will actually touch up, later by the end of this session again. Now, all you need to do is specify the percentage of the data that is going to sit on SSD and the amount of deduplication compression savings. Now, you don't have to do that. If you want to actually make changes, you can actually make the changes in there. Otherwise, you can go with the default values that we have actually specified in there. One of the assumptions that we make in this estimator is that we consider the total amount of capacity that you have on FSx ONTAP and then actually split that into an 80-20 ratio, where we consider 20% of that data that is sitting on FSx ONTAP is database workload, and it can be any database for that matter. And if you look at that particular database profile, you would see all of the data is sitting 100% on SSD, and the compression and deduplication ratio will be slightly lesser, and then the provisioned IOPS and the throughput capacity. Keep in mind, again, as Richard and Kiran mentioned, with FSx ONTAP, you can actually change throughput or the capacity on the fly, and you can shrink accordingly. You can shrink the volume size, but if you're looking to shrink the file system capacity, that's not possible. However, once you get started with the file system and then you have the volumes created, you can always shrink the volume according to the capacity requirements that you need. Now, similarly, we have the 80% of the data, which we consider as the virtual machine data in there. And that will have way higher compression deduplication ratio. As you know, we have large number of customers running VMware workload on premises, and we see huge amount of savings that customer get using storage efficiencies. So we kind of, putting specific value. And again, I've seen customers getting 80% as well. However, the estimator considers 65%. Now, once that is done, again, one of the points that Kiran touched on, in the earlier implementation, we had transit gateway, which is still used with multi-AZ deployments. However, right now, as of yesterday, we have single AZ supported with VPC peering. That means, by default, the estimator is not considering the transit gateway cost. So there is no cost at all associated with any of the network related charges that comes up with transit gateway. You can easily go with VPC peering, and there is a process for it. There is a blog post that we have actually, posted out there. We can go through the steps, on how to actually get this up and running. Once you have selected that, all you need to do is go and click on submit. That is it. Now, what happens at this point? The sausage is being made. Just kidding. What happens is we are sending the JSON payloads back and forth, and we are exchanging all of those. And now the sizer would actually predict the host count that is required. The estimator in this case is going to show you how FSx ONTAP is going to help the deployment. As you can see, if I just slightly scroll up, the initial sizing would look like having 25 nodes in VMware Cloud using an I4I instance type. And what you can do is, if you strip off that capacity requirements from there, you would see you only need around 14 nodes. And this information is coming straight from the VMware sizer. What we do, we are going to actually add FSx ONTAP to the mix. And that's what we are seeing here. So with 14 hosts plus 193 terabyte of capacity, customer can actually save 41%. That is a comparison that is done against the overall vSAN solution. Now, what if we actually compare just the amount of nodes that you have, which is 11 in this case, to accommodate that additional capacity, and then add the exact capacity that you need to actually, meet this workload requirements using FSx ONTAP, you would see that would be a whopping 92% of savings. Now, that's the number that talks for itself. I don't have to explain any further on this, but that gives you a clear picture on how FSx ONTAP will actually simplify your VMware Cloud adoption, right? Which means you can actually use lift and shift as an approach and then refactor at your own pace and as you see fit. But the bottom line is you can embrace AWS Cloud faster. So once again, this will enable every customer out there to leverage the tools and the processes within the VMware environment to get the migration and the adoption going. As I said again in the beginning, the estimator is available to all the partners and customers out there, so feel free to leverage the same. Keep in mind, total cost of ownership is just the beginning from the adoption standpoint. We are here, helping our customers achieve the best possible deployment models. We have added additional capabilities, which again Kiran touched upon, including backup and restore using FSx snapshots, which means it's going to help avoid any of the VMware related snapshot merging and deletion issues. Disaster recovery using block level replication, again first of its kind in AWS itself, which is of course a topic by itself for future webinars, and we'll be back soon to cover those in detail. With that said, Richard, back to you, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Nemo. That was really good, really insightful, very exciting to hear about the VPC peering, right? And how that's going to reduce the cost for the single AZ deployment. So very happy to hear that. I think there's a few questions that have come in. So let me see if Nemo, if you and Kieran can answer some of these. So the first question is, how are snapshots handled? That's kind of a broad question, but so
okay.
like, I'm not sure if it's VM snapshots or ONTAP snapshots, but yeah, that's the question that's coming in. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take that. So FSx ONTAP, as you know, it's nothing but powered by ONTAP. Gives you the snapshot functionality. If you're looking at taking a snapshot of the data store, you can do that, using the CLI itself, or you can actually rely on the automatic schedule for the snapshots that is available within FSx ONTAP console itself. Now, if you're talking about taking application consistent snapshot or say VMware consistent snapshot from a file system standpoint, we have capabilities, which I mentioned, towards the end of my slide, where we have introduced BlueXP backup and recovery, which can provide you both crash consistent as well as VMware file system consistent backups. And on top of it, application consistent backup for the virtual machines that is actually hosting databases and so on. That's all actually, available today, which customers can leverage. But again, as I said, that is something that we'll cover in detail in the upcoming webinars.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Nima. The next question is, can I deploy FSx for ONTAP for VMware data stores in a way that provides the same high availability and durability guarantee that you get with internal data stores with like vSAN?
Do you want me to take that one, Nima?
Go ahead, mate. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for the question. As I mentioned earlier in the slide, we support single and a multi-AZ. So the level of availability is 3 nines of availability on the single AZ, which matches what you get with a standard SDDC deployment. And when I say standard, I mean a non-stretched cluster. So you get stretched clusters and non-stretched clusters. So this integration is currently only available for non-stretched clusters or standard clusters today. Stretched clusters is a roadmap item that'll hopefully get delivered in some point in the future. But you get, with the FSx for NetApp ONTAP, if you go with peering or the TGW, you get 3 nines of availability for the single file system deployment on a single AZ. Multi-AZ gives you 4 nines of availability. So that both matches and can exceed what an SDDC vSAN deployment can currently do. Now, of course, if you do a stretch cluster with vSAN, you also get 4 nines of availability, but then you're paying for those additional resources on the other availability zone. You can only go up to 50% utilizations on both. Whereas this one here, you can have just the data in 2 different availability zones, and we can orchestrate some sort of HA to bring those data up in case you lost a file system in a specific availability zone. So that hopefully answers your question. If that wasn't too clear, do ping me again, and we can follow that up.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. That's very good information, Kieran. Thanks. So the next question is, I'm using ONTAP on premises, and are there similar features on FSx ONTAP, essentially where like things for like flex clones, I'm able to also use that with my VMC deployment?
I'll take that. Yes, again, as we have been re-emphasizing the point here, FSx ONTAP is nothing but ONTAP. You get most of the functionalities in there. And definitely you can leverage flex clones, within your VMware Cloud deployments. Absolutely possible.
Awesome, thanks. And I think we'll take one last question here. So what are the key best practices and points I should keep track of to keep my FSx for VMC deployment the most cost efficient possible?
Okay, I can take that one, and then maybe Nima, you can follow up in case I miss anything. Like all deployments, or when you move to a new hardware platform on-prem or a new storage bay on-prem, we always ask customers, and we can work with them to help them on that, is to make sure that they right-size their environment. So, in the on-prem environment, we have the problem where you need to buy things for 2 or 3 years up front, and that's all the capacity or budget you might have for up then. But that doesn't exist with VMware Cloud and AWS. And given how you can linearly scale Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, you really don't need to buy all that storage up front. So we would say is look at right sizing your environment, get your RV tools, look at your used space versus your allocated space, add another 10% buffer or something onto that to make sure that you can grow, or 20%, whatever your business mandates, and then move those workloads onto VMC. Same as the use the monitoring tools that were available. Make sure that you haven't oversubscribed the CPU and the memory on any of those two. You bring those within reason or within usage, and then you can scale up as needed to keep your hypervisor costs and your cluster size a bit more under control. And then, of course, there's all the efficiencies that Nimo's a little bit more qualified to talk to on the NetApp side that can also probably help with that.
Yeah, Kieran, you kind of covered it pretty well. The point to emphasize is sizing is always an ongoing exercise. It never ends. When you actually get onto an environment, there have been instances where we have seen, specifically in on-premises with my customers, they keep adding more and more workload onto an existing cluster, expecting that, oh, it's going to perform. But keep in mind, to the point that Kieran mentioned, you have to have your monitoring tools in place, monitor them, at the same time, have the best practices in terms of, hey, am I actually adding the right number of virtual machines onto that particular data store? I'm able to actually, have the growth, can I grow the data store the way I need it? And all of these things is readily doable with FSx ONTAP for the simple reason because AWS has made it so simple. All you do is, with the click of a button or an API, you can actually size the volume from say 50 terabyte, 100 terabyte, boom, just like this. And all you need to do is go and refresh the capacity in your vCenter, right? And we have best practices that we have actually laid out. It is available on VMware documentation page, which is the VMware Tech Zone site. And you'll see all of the best practices that is actually covered in there. But again, if you have specific questions, we understand, we cannot cover all of this in webinar and just the Q&A. We are always happy to actually help you with that. And to add to that, I did see one question specifically asked, Richard, maybe something, let's talk about it if we have time.
Sure.
Do we have any real-time examples where customers actually seen benefit using FSx ONTAP? I would like to add to the point that Kiran mentioned earlier, we are seeing huge uptake and interest in actually the solution. We have seen customers seeing the ability to actually reduce the number of nodes in their deployment by half, just to actually get their TCO optimized and then have, longevity in terms of leveraging the capability by using multiple data stores, in case of FSx ONTAP, because you can have up to 4 data stores with NFS v3. That means you can actually size them up accordingly. And as again, it was mentioned during this presentation that, we can have multiple file systems. And that's the beauty of the solution that you actually get. And then when you actually size it correctly, my goodness, you will see the exact same numbers that you would actually see with the TCO estimator that I actually showcased. And again, we can actually have further detailed sessions, if you have specific questions or if you are in that journey, more than happy to actually, come back and walk you guys through the exact benefits, in what you can see for specific to your environment. What we spoke is very generic and is applicable to every customer, but again, every customer is unique. So we can actually customize it to what you really need and make your deployment really successful and cost effective.
Yeah. So thanks, Nemo. I think that really then leads into what we're going to ask next, right? Is if you are interested in getting more information, if you want to, talk about your particular use cases, you want to see a live demo, please, either raise your hand in the tool or just put your name into the chat. And we'll gather that information and we'll reach out to you so you can really get that next level of information and really, some specialized questions you may have, right, that we didn't get to answer today. We'll definitely cover that. So yeah, please either put your name in the chat or raise your hand and we'll note you that way. Also, one last thing, thanks for going ahead for the next slide, Nemo. Please visit us at reInvent. We will be there. Nemo will be there. I will be there. We're at booth 950. So please come by with any of your, FSx for NetApp ONTAP questions. We'll be there, obviously about VMC or about any of the other, workloads that you may have where this will definitely be a really good tool set to use. So please visit us there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for those who can't, not everyone's unable to attend reInvent, but and I'm one of them. But if you'd like to get hold of those demos, if you go to the Tech Zone page, VMware Cloud and AWS Tech Zone page, as well as NetApp's page, where they talk about this, Nemo's actually built a lot of those demos for you, so you can actually deploy a VPC and SDDC through a click-through demo, and we've done that on VMware side as well, and actually see that whole process end-to-end go through without actually deploying any hardware. So that's a really useful thing to see as well, without having to, if you're not unable to attend, and like to do that right after this session. So please go and look at that.
Yeah, it's really slick. It's really slick. It's a great demo thing to walk through, and you really feel like you're doing it, even though you're not there. It's a great learning tool before you would actually get and start to having to pay for any resources. Yep. So
yeah, maybe we can get that sent out as part of the at the end of this webinar, as part of that, links to both. We'll try and get that done.
We'll do that. Yeah. So thank you today for today's webinar. I think we'll be ending it here. As I mentioned earlier, that we're going to have some upcoming webinars as well for some of these other, data protection aspects and VM backups and things like that, where FSxN for ONTAP can also help you in those workloads. But thanks for your attendance today. Keep your eyes open for future webinars. Thanks, Nemo, and thanks, Kieran, for giving some really great information today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.